We're good to go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, where to start with this one? So this poem by Aşık İbreti or İbreti Baba, who again is another individual in our history from this tradition that we call the Hakikatçis. Similar to Meruli Baba, another famous Hakikatçi. İbreti Baba's poems, I think, when you look at quite a few of them, you'll see a very similar characteristic of being quite bold about certain aspects of neighboring cultures, communities and religions. The first verse, right, in and of itself, it stands out.
Minareye çıkıp bize bağırma, bağırma. Haberimiz vardır, sağır değiliz, değiliz. Sen kendini düşün, bizi kayırma, kayırma. Sizlerle kavgaya değiliz, değiliz, değiliz, dur.
So why is this important? Why is this sort of key? Well, a very basic question one may ask about Alevis is how are they different to Islam, or how, in sort of practice, how are they different? And the one thing that every Alevi would say, regardless of their view of Alevism, is that we don't go to a mosque to pray. İbreti Baba's sort of taking it a step further, right? He's being confrontational and saying, okay, it's a fact that we don't go to a mosque. I mean, you can tell it from the lyrics, but also, you may go and you may do whatever you want there, but you shouting it out to us isn't going to change what we believe in. And when you look at the history of Alevis, the history of the Kızılbaş, the history of Bektaşis, maybe with Bektaşis is a bit more nuanced because of its interplay with the Ottoman Empire. But at least for the Alevis and the Kızılbaş, you find that in any case where they faced conflict, it sort of spurred on even Alevis to take a bolder stance against the ruling class, against the ruling hegemony of Islam in the region. And in fact, maybe the most sort of discreet forms of assimilation against Alevis have come in a discreet way, as opposed to through force. Now, of course, when it comes to conflicts as well, displacing people leads to that afterwards, sure, but I think it's an interesting sort of aspect of trying to force change upon this community. The easiest way of being a missionary, right, is to build your institute of religion, or your place of worship within a community that doesn't believe in that. And then to eventually offer them amenities or offer them something within that place that draws them in and changes them. Now it's different, I guess, with Islam, because you have this call to prayer that happens, right? And Alevi villages that have this are sort of subject to that. But İbreti Baba is saying it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how loudly you shout at us. It doesn't matter what you say. That we're not going to stray from our path. And as I said, in all of his poems, he takes quite this forwards stance against mainstream Islam, if you like. If you go through the rest of the poem, though, it's a bit more of a description of what Alevis do believe in.
Her yerde biz Hakkı hazır, biliriz, biliriz. Her yerde biz Hakkı hazır, biliriz, biliriz. Olgun insanları Hızır, biliriz, biliriz. Bundan başkasını sıfır, biliriz, biliriz. Tahminimiz yanlış, biz kör değiliz, değiliz, değiliz, dur.
We find Hakkı in everything that we observe in every aspect of our lives. And then he talks about another sort of key belief. Alevis have this belief of Hakkı, yes, but also they have this very key belief of Hızır, which is quite pivotal and quite a central part in the Alevi faith. I think if you were to sort of go and look at this from both a historical and a sociological perspective, you should find that people will think or have or say Hızır much more often than they would talk about any conception of God. Because Hızır is much more of an important figure and an important belief within the day-to-day lives of Alevis. And so that's why he talks about Hızır in this sense. Mature people is who we consider to be a Hızır, and Hızır in this sense is the thing that's going to help you, the thing that's going to in some way maybe save you, or the thing that's going to give you strength. Because that's how we use the word and phrase Hızır in our day-to-day lives.
Eğer insanlıksa doğru niyetin, niyetin. Nefsini ıslah et varsa kudretin Bize lazım değil senin cennetin Buraya kılmana esir değiliz dost.
If your purpose is to help humanity, then you're sort of supposing at the same time that you have something to say, you have something of importance to put out there. But if that's the case, then you also have to make sure that your own ego has been subdued, your own ego has been tamed, has been nurtured. Here, quite clearly, he's saying, making the distinction between our belief of the afterlife, because we have none, right? We believe in devriye, which is something very different to believing in an afterlife where people go to once they die. And he's saying we don't need this, like we don't need this conception of heaven or hell. In the Abrahamic religions, the sort of belief in the afterlife in some way incites people to have to work towards something. That your ethical actions shouldn't be based or are not based on doing good things for any other reason apart from trying to do better in another life. But it does give people hope. The world that we live in, it is undeniable that there are situations and circumstances that people face which seem horrible, which seem horrific. From wars to disease to illness to accidents that can happen, right? And it's an unfortunate aspect of the world we live in, of how fragile our lives are and how easily they can come to an end. But there's a chance of something being different in the afterlife. You can understand why that exists in that sense. It's abuse and its use by institutionalized religion, and I think that's the key distinction to make, something to be critical of. And fundamentally, Alevis and Alevism has never had or never made space for that within its belief system. Not only because Alevism was never at the sort of economic position to become institutional, but because my belief is always this, that the term Alevi can never be used for any group of people that are dominating others. That is not a feature, a characteristic of the Alevi belief. And so they would never be in a position to impose these rules about the afterlife or any kind of dogma, because that strays from the sort of key and core element of Alevis throughout history.
Arapça duaya değiliz mecbur Arapça duaya değiliz mecbur İster Müslüman bil istersen gavur İnsanı hor görmek en büyük küfür Buna inanmışız münkür değiliz dost.
Okay, let's say you have a religion, and your religion has a particular language. It doesn't have to be Arabic. To believe that language is the holy language, that God could only speak in that one language is, of course, that's the sort of thing he's criticizing there.
İbreti bu hale insan acınır İbreti bu hale insan acınır Hamsoftalar bu sözlerden gücenir Aslına ermeyen elbet gocunur Ona avutmaya mecbur değiliz dost.
He's saying these words, he's going, well, sometimes it's kind of sad when I look out at the world and see the amount by which very intelligent human beings can be trapped within these particular beliefs, that when you break them down, sort of crumble. So İbreti Baba, he's taking these simple arguments and he's breaking them down one by one. And his poems, for that, are, I think, incredibly valuable. I enjoy playing and singing and reading these poems just because of that.